It's great to be here with you guys tonight. This is a big, big room. Wow. Hello back there. I know it sounds crazy, but man, I was just all teary during that last song because I was new to the faith, and it was all so new and unexpected. And I know this is hard to believe, but I used to be like a hippie. And I guess I never grew out of it. And so I went and heard this band called The Second Chapter of Acts. And they felt everything that was drug-induced and without drugs. And it was so astonishing to me. And so this guy comes up to me and he says, hey, my wife just put your book on my desk last week, Soul Cravings. And he goes, I guess I've had it for a while. He never read it. And he says, I just read it, and then I saw your name, and it's good to meet you. I said, well, what's your name? And he said, Matthew Ward. And I said, wow, that's an unusual name. That's kind of a famous name in some parts, some places. But I didn't think he was Matthew Ward, because the last time I saw him, he had really long, blonde hair down to his feet, And so I was a little confused. But when he sang, the Easter song was sort of like my national anthem. How about you? It was like this incredible experience of realizing that the Savior, the Creator of the universe, sees us and has a desire for us, an intention for us, and that we are pursued by love. And I've just always been so grateful to be invited into this story of the one who loves us so profoundly. And it's really a privilege and a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And I want to thank Arlen and everyone for inviting me again. It's so nice to be invited back. And that's a rare but good sign for me. And I know a few years ago, maybe some of you here, I was supposed to be here, and our plane circled Edmonton, and the pilot decided it was too cold and went back to the U.S. And so now it's 60 degrees warmer at 15. And so God bless you for being here. And Father, I just thank you so much for the privilege of being here in this moment and sharing community with this unique tribe of followers. And I ask you, God, that in these moments, something life-giving would take place. And God, you know how many voices swirl inside my head, and how many conversations seem to be in conflict with each other. And I simply ask you, God, that somehow through the words that I speak, that there would be a resonance with what your Spirit is saying to us already. And God, you would illuminate us and awaken us to a life yet unperceived. And Jesus, we want you to know we love you. And we are still astonished and amazed that you would choose us to be the objects of your affection. We pray in your name. Amen. So I began thinking about what would be the most appropriate thing to share with you tonight. And one of the great challenges for me at this time in my life is that there are so many different things that are happening that make us the people we are. And I know in my own life, God has taken us on such a journey over the past few years. And I want to, in some ways, take some liberties and kind of share with you the journey I'm on right now. And maybe take that and try to translate that into some moments of learning or reflection for all of us here tonight. Like perhaps some of you, I didn't grow up in the church. I mean, I grew up fairly irreligious, or maybe religiously eclectic. I'm an immigrant from El Salvador to the United States, and so Spanish was my first language. English I learned in school. I had kind of a religiously odd kind of background. My grandmother was Roman Catholic, though we never went to Mass. My grandfather was a humanist who took me to a house, and he said the 9-year-old boy lived there, and then he died, and my grandfather said to me that 9-year-old boy was reincarnated, and that became him. And so I was raised believing salvation at the same time. And the upside is that Jesus can save you in every life. And for those of you who are a little nervous about me, I'm kidding, I'm joking, okay? But he can save you as many lives as you have. And then my mom was essentially able to just experienced a traumatic moment in her life, and there was an earthquake in Managua, Guatemala, and I remember in the only spiritual conversation we ever had, she said, I just can't believe in God. How can a God exist and allow such a tragic event to take place, to kill so many innocent people? And that day she said, I think I'm really more Jewish, but she didn't really mean Jewish, she meant deist, although a lot of Jewish people are deists, so maybe she was right. And then later in her life, she came home and she brought a Buddha to her home. And we were probably the first Latino Buddhists in the world. And we went through a season of being Buddhists, and we didn't really know how to be Buddhists, and we didn't know the principles of Buddha, so we rubbed the Buddha's belly and asked the Buddha to help us and guide us along in life. And then we had a tragic event take place, and my mom blamed it on Buddha, and she took the Buddha outside and destroyed it in an act of defiance against the God who is Buddha, which we really didn't know. And then, of course, in the middle of all that, I began a desperate search for God. I went through confirmation and catechism and pretended I memorized the prayers, but really didn't. And I did notice that Jesus was in desperate need of help as he hung there on the cross. And so I asked Jesus to help me one day, and he didn't. And so I pretty much decided he was either non-existent, a figment of our imagination, or simply indifferent and unconcerned with my life. And at some point along the way, I moved to such a level of despair and what some people might call psychosis that I believed I was from another planet. That's not the funny part of the story. That's the tragic part. That's the part you're supposed to empathize with. And maybe it's the planet I thought I was from that makes you laugh. I don't know, but I actually thought I was from another planet and would go outside and I would speak into the universe and beg whatever civilization left me here on Earth in this really morbid and painful experiment to come back and get me. I had such a desperate level of loneliness in the world that words could not possibly describe the pain I felt inside. So by the time I was 12 years old, I was in a psychiatric chair. Why, you might wonder, and spent time in the hospital, and eventually found myself going through surgery where they opened me up, performing what they called exploratory surgery to see what was wrong with me, but there was nothing wrong with my body, my soul was sick. And I want you to know tonight that a part of the story of my life is this desperate search for something that seems so elusive and evasive that all I can do is describe it as God. And my retroactive memory tells me that there were people of faith all around me who never talked to me about Jesus. And as I went back and asked them why, they told me because they thought I would not be open to the Savior of the world. And what I find in so many of our environments, and in our churches and our communities of faith, is this desperate frustration between the longing we have to connect people to the God who created them and loves them, and our inability to somehow transcend the huge chasm between where we are and where they are, and helping them connect to this God who is so real and palatable and tangible to us. And in my own life, I had to ask some pretty, I felt, pressing and heavy questions. What was I doing with my life what mattered most? What was the work that I was giving myself to? Was it actually accomplishing the good I longed to do in the world? Was it possible that I was missing something along the way, and that there was a broader approach toward my life that I needed to step into to have the greatest positive effect and good in the world? And I want to talk to you about 3 environments I think we need to nurture if we're going to effectively reach this world with the love and life of Jesus. And the first arena I think is so critical for us is this arena that I think could best describe as beauty. I think one of the most confusing things for me as a follower of Christ was how there seemed to be a conflict between faith and beauty. There seemed to be almost a war between Christianity and art in general. And I was told and taught to get rid of all my books, and I was a philosophy student, so I had to get rid of all those books and get rid of all my albums, and I got rid of all my albums and stopped watching movies and stopped watching television, and for a period of my life, I became entirely detached from the outside world. And so much of that world was the world of beauty and story and creativity. And then there were expressions of those human experiences, but it seemed almost as if they were so sanitized and so controlled, we were afraid that beauty might cost us our meaning. I think that we became the disciples of John Stuart Mill far more convincingly than we became the disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. John Stuart Mill, of course, was the one who taught us to be utilitarian, to measure the value of things by how much good, how much utilitarian good they do for us. And I found the conversation in the church was so utilitarian. Does this work? Well, what are the numerical outcomes of this? And frankly, in a world of utility, beauty has no place. But the question I think we must ask ourselves is beauty supplemental, or is it essential to the human spirit? And I began thinking about how we build the narrative of human history. I mean, some people write about history through kingdoms and empires and nations, and others tell the story of humanity through wars and revolutions and battles. Others tell the story of human history through poetry and song and art. But I found these words from Solomon in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, and I felt as if this was a moment where God was trying to show us the essential power of the creation itself. Solomon writes, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. I just want all the Baptists to reflect for a moment. We've got the mourning part now. The time to scatter stones and the time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent. And a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. And I realized what Solomon was telling us was that life is this tension between tragedy and beauty. That they're two conflicting, interwoven narratives. That bind us all together. I remember once I was sitting with a young artist. He told me how he was struggling to find work. He said all the businesses that want me to use my art to create propaganda for things that are not true. They don't want to deal with real emotions. I said, well, like what? They don't want to deal with the real emotions like pain and suffering and violence. I said, well, what are the superficial emotions that they want you to focus on? It was like joy, happiness, love. And I looked at him and I said, Ronald, is it possible that while suffering and pain and sorrow are real emotions, that joy and even happiness and love can be real, genuine human emotions. He paused and he was silent for quite a long time. He said, that thought has never occurred to me. This week, that artist, 20 years after the conversation, took his life. See, one of the things I know about art is that art does not exist unless there's an authentic expression of the self. You can have art without hope. Profound and provocative art can be an expression of our violence. It can be an expression of our despair. It can be an expression of our hopelessness. And if only those who only know those human emotions create the art of the world, only a part of the human story is going to be told. I am so convinced that we as the church have abdicated this conversation by not committing ourselves to creating the most beautiful works in the world. By not taking responsibility for beauty. And through art and beauty to tell the story of hope and love and even happiness. So we decided to start making films to try to infuse into the story of us and the story of God. An expression of that beauty, to believe the way God created and navigated human history is the right approach. I mean, think about it. If beauty is supplemental, why did God go through all the effort? I mean, why did he create flowers of every kind and color? Why did he create aromas? Why did God create flavors? Why did God create colors? I mean, if beauty is not essential, why isn't all creation simply gray? Why doesn't everything taste like cardboard? Why isn't there simply one brown color? And why does all UPS get to dominate it? Is it possible that when God created humanity, he understood that a part of our essence was to be created and inspired and brought to life the beauty all around us? How is it possible for us to be connected to the God of creation, to the beautiful one, and not be the epicenter of human beauty? And so we decided in this film series around the elements around creation: wind, water, fire, wood, earth. And we partnered with this group called David C. Cook, and we did a series of films. And one, so I can actually catch my breath, but two, so we can just show you a small part of it. We decided to take these narratives, and I want to show you just a brief clip from one called Wind. Because I love the word ruach, the word pneuma. Because the word ruach pneuma means spirit, but it also means wind, but it also means breath. And when I began studying the scriptures, it struck me that humanity was started with a kiss. That when God breathed life into us, it was mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And it shouldn't surprise us that Jesus was betrayed by a kiss. And is it possible that the wind blows across the world, and every moment when we inhale and exhale the oxygen all around us, that God poised it so all of creation would constantly let us know that God is simply one breath away? I just want you to watch with me and enjoy it for a second.
At the beginning of the scriptures, it says that the wind of God hovered over the waters. The scriptures that God formed man out of the dust, and then God breathed life into us. That, in a sense, the wind of God, the breath of God, is like the very first kiss. In that moment, we became living beings. We became humans. And it all began with a kiss.
practice of art, of making beauty no longer supplemental but essential. Because for art to exist, there does not have to be hope. But for beauty to exist, there must be hope. And it struck me that if the human narrative is the tension between tragedy and beauty, that God makes everything beautiful in its time, that then God would be, of course, the ultimate expression of beauty. And then the words of Isaiah resonated in my head in a way they never had before. Listen to this. It says, "Who has believed our message? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of the dry ground. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised, and we held him in low esteem." Here in Isaiah saying the most beautiful one, the creator of all things beautiful, walked among us, and we saw no beauty in him. And I started asking myself, is it possible to actually think something that's hideous is beautiful? And something that's beautiful is actually hideous? Is that possible? I think it is. See, when I was growing up, we ate all of our meat burnt. I mean, part of it is I'm Latino, and we think carbon is a food group. But everything was burnt. When I smelled something burning, I knew dinner was on. And then I got a job at a steak restaurant when I was like 14 years old because I wanted to eat meat. Because I'm a carnivore. I know in LA, that's not very PC. Everybody's a vegan. But I always tell people, I have an ethical problem with eating fruit and vegetables. I just want to eat anything that cannot run for its life. And so I grew up eating all my meat burnt. Then I got this job at the steak restaurant, and I ordered my free lunch on the first day I worked, and I wanted it well done, because why would you want anything less than well done? And then the cook came in the back and he said, "The chef refuses to cook your steak well done." He says, "My free steak, that's why I got a job here. I want my steak well done." He went back, he came back and said, "He won't cook it." He said, "He will not ruin his meat." I said, "I want my steak well done." And the chef left the kitchen and came back angry. He said, "I want to talk to the man who wants to ruin my meat." I'm like, "That's me." He was like, "I will not cook it well done." He goes, "I'll make you a deal. Let me cook you one piece, medium rare. If you don't like it, I'll cook you another steak and I'll burn it for you." I thought, 2 steaks, that's a win. So I said, okay. He brought me this steak that looked like it was about to walk off the plate. It was bleeding into the potatoes. It was so nauseating. And he stood there and waited. And I finally had to cut into it. It wasn't even cutting right. The steak had no will. It was cutting like butter. I mean, what's wrong with it? Fight, man, fight for your life. And I cut it and took a long pause, and I put it in my mouth, and I had to get used to the texture because I didn't have to chew. And chew. And chew. It just sort of melted in my mouth. And in that moment, I met God. I knew that all the things I believed before them were wrong. There was all the mythology, but now I knew it was true. You see, I had trained myself to love the hideous and to despise the beautiful. It took a moment, it took a man with the courage to teach me a new way, to see the beauty of medium rare. It's the same with coffee. I mean, are there any coffee stores here? Yeah, I grew up on Sanka. I grew up on Folgers and Maxwell House and Juan Valdez and Good to Last Drop. And, you know, I didn't have a discriminating tongue in anyone. And the first time I went to Starbucks, I have to be honest with you, it was really harsh. Like, whoa, who can drink this? And I told my friend, I can't drink this. This is horrible. He goes, no, that's because you've trained yourself to enjoy swill. said, what? He goes, you have to retrain your tongue. Because your tongue is used to drinking battery acid. And you have to retrain yourself to enjoy elegance. Now, Starbucks doesn't really quite do it for me. I mean, I'll walk anywhere, go anywhere to find that awesome, incredible cappuccino, espresso latte, flat white. Because all of a sudden you're elevated. And all of a sudden you see the world in a whole new way. And have you been around these coffee shops? It's got to be drip, it's got to be what's called pour over coffee or French press, and it's true. My wife says, you're a coffee snob. I said, I know. But it's because once I was lost. But once you've seen the way, you can't go back. Hebrews, it says that. Once you've been enlightened by the Spirit and have tasted of life, you can't go back. There's no hope for you if you go back. You know why? Because you can train yourself to love the mundane and despise the beautiful. So we go to church and we sit in the pews and we experience uneventful moments together. And we would never invite someone in because it doesn't even inspire us to change. And we wonder why the world doesn't believe that God is with us. I have a sense that everywhere God is, the world is being recreated. Everywhere God is, the beautiful has come. He makes all things beautiful in time. If we're going to reach this world, we need to develop a value for beauty. We need to take time to create things that actually inspire awe in us. Take time and enjoy sunrises and sunsets and roaring rivers. And you know one thing I discovered? That of all my brokenness and all the sickness inside of me, once I began to live a life that I was created to live, I became aware of the beautiful all around me. One time we were climbing up this hill, my wife and a friend and my kids and myself, and they were way ahead of me, I'm not sure why. I was sort of dragging behind, and all of a sudden I saw this rock formation on the side of the hill, and I saw this little flower just bursting out of the rocks. And I said, everyone, stop, come back, come back. And they all started laughing and started. I said, why are you laughing? They said, we made them bet that you would see that flower and they would come back and look at it. This isn't me getting in touch with my feminine side or anything like that. What happened inside of me is there was a time in my life, no matter how much beauty was around me, all I could see was barrenness. And then somehow, through the recreative process of Jesus in me, he began to teach me how to see beauty even in the most barren places and spaces. We need to reclaim the value for the beautiful. But not only do we need to step into the space called beauty, but we really need to begin to step into this place I can best describe as creativity. See, we need to create beautiful things, but we also need to begin to take value in the uniqueness and capacity of every human being. I don't know why, but for some reason along the way, we started believing that if you and I promoted human potential and human talent, that would be a violation of the glory of God. And so I hear this language, oh, it's not me, it's the Lord. Not like you. Honestly, you were awesome, but if God did it, it probably would have been better. Have you ever heard people do that? Like, I just sang that song, but it wasn't me, it was the Lord. No, it was you, because you went flat. I don't think the Holy Spirit goes flat. We just use the spiritualized language. And by the way, if you get every note, it was still you. Why can't you get up there and say, I practiced for 10 years, 15 hours a day, so I wouldn't go flat? But we can't say that because we think we were taught it's a violation of the glory of God, right? And so we go, oh no, it's what Paul says. In my weakness, God is made strong, so I can only use my weakness. That explains a lot of people singing. It explains a lot of preachers. Oh wow, if you just let God use his weakness. Oh, awesome. That's absurd, don't you think? See, here's the thought. You at your highest capacity, maximizing all of your talent, at the height of your intellect, pales in comparison to the awesomeness of God. You don't have to do what you're bad at to make God look good. I better dance. Right? That way God can look awesome because I look like an idiot. No, actually, it's the other way around. God is glorified when the creative uniqueness of every individual is nurtured, developed, and unleashed. God is glorified when the image and likeness of Jesus is unlocked inside of you, and all that God-given capacity is used to serve the world and make it better. I love the phrase in the scriptures that Stephen uses to describe Moses. It's in the book of Acts, chapter 7. No, that's the wrong chapter. Chapter 7. I hate when they move these verses. It can't be my fault. Acts chapter 7, verse 20. Stephen says this: at that time, Moses was born, and he was no ordinary child. I love that. Wouldn't you want that to be said about you when you were born? When you were born, you were no ordinary child. My mom would always say, "Oh, Alex, what a beautiful baby with his black curly hair, and Duffy, what a beautiful baby with her red hair and green eyes, and Leo, what a beautiful baby with her blonde hair and brown eyes. Erwin, he looked like a rat." I have always liked cheese, and I was a straight D student at 1st through 12th grade, so I knew that I was not prodigious in any way. It was Shakespeare who said, "Some men are born great." My mom made it very clear that was not me. Then he said, "Some attain greatness." Well, my last day of high school, my English teacher came up to me and she said, "Erwin, have you thought about going to college?" I said, "Yeah, maybe." She goes, "You will never make it." So I knew I had not attained greatness. I was waiting, I was holding back. I didn't want to confuse the world. And then Shakespeare said, "Some men are born great, others attain greatness, but others have greatness thrust upon them." And I'm so convinced that when you enter a relationship with Jesus Christ, that maybe you were not born great, and maybe you have not attained greatness, but the moment you enter into a relationship with the living God, greatness is thrust upon you. And what we need to begin to value is the God-given uniqueness and creative potential in every person, and stop acting like for a person to live their life at a maximum capacity is somehow in defiance of the glory of God. When you were born, you were no ordinary child. Oh, and by the way, I don't think Moses' parents said that. This is Stephen looking back on history. See, I think when Moses was born, he looked just like every other ordinary child. I think he looked like a shrunken version of his grandmother. I don't think Moses was glowing or anything like that. Stephen was projecting back, seeing the life of Moses, who described himself as saying, "I'm not very good at anything." But because he lived out the life God created him to live, the story is rewritten. When Moses was born, he was no ordinary child. I am convinced there has never been one ordinary human being born on this planet. How about you? That's all right. But then here's the drama. I'm also convinced a lot of ordinary people die. So we're born extraordinary, but most of us die ordinary. So somewhere between our first breath and our last breath, all the extraordinary is sucked out of us. And the church should be the place where every child discovers their God-given capacity, where every human being hears that inner voice that says to them, "Your life matters. Inside of you there is a gift the world desperately needs." We need to begin to own the space of beauty. But we need to also begin to own the space of creativity. The church should be the epicenter of human creativity. And by the way, the church has been historically. The best communicators in the world have come out of the church. The best singers in our culture, they came out of the church. In fact, whenever the church wants something, it's amazing how the church finds a way to raise up a tribe. All over the world, there are organs and organ players. Isn't that weird? You go to Brazil, there are organs. I can tell you, organs are not indigenous to Brazil. You go to Montana, a little church with 20 people. There's an organ there. And an organ player. I mean, what are the chances? 100%. Because if you put an organ there, it's amazing how eventually you'll have an organ player. Oh, the other side, forgot. Piano. Because we know there are only two instruments God really wanted. The organ and the piano. And that's why in every church of every size, God raises up a piano player and an organ player. And because there's a podium, he raises up a speaker. And because there are buckets, he raises up ushers. And because there are mostly pews, he raises up listeners. I guarantee you, everything that your church decides it needs to make a difference in the world, it will raise up. I imagine a day where all the Buddhists and Hindus and atheists will be begging to get their children into our programs, because if they don't get their kids into our programs, their kids will be left behind. I just imagine a day where like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens' family, they're like dragging their kids to a church, just in pain. Take them. Can you keep the God stuff down? But they have to bring them into our communities, because only in our communities is human creativity and talent and potential nurtured and developed and maximized in this way. Because we value the uniqueness of every human being. That would be so much fun, wouldn't it? My daughter Mariah, she's a musical artist, and in fact, the New York Times, she did a story on her, and it was such a beautiful and positive critique of her first album. And she's having this amazing experience writing music and singing music and getting to perform across the country. But I remember when she was around 2 years old, we were changing channels, and we heard an orchestra. When we changed the channel, she started singing exactly what the orchestra played. I said, "Kim, go back, watch." And she just started mimicking the orchestra and singing in perfect pitch. And so I would sit with her in her bedroom with the guitar, and I'd start writing music with her when she was 3, 4, 5 years old. And then I recorded a few of her words for one of her songs when she was around 8 years old. And so by the time she was in 3rd grade, she had on the wall at her school, "These are the names of all my songs," and she listed like 20 songs she'd never written. And these are all the countries around the world I want to perform them in. You see, because she didn't know that was impossible. She didn't know it was absurd to think that way. When we create environments that nurture human creativity, we unleash the God-given capacity inside of that person. We need to begin to build on beauty and on creativity and on story. We need to begin to tell stories, not about us, but stories that help the world find themselves in the story of God. I love the way Paul does this in Athens. He walks around Athens and he sees all the idols, and instead of rebuking them for all their idolatry, he says, "You guys are so creative. Look at all the gods you've created. That's awesome. Look at this, man. You guys just invented that. You think there's so many." Right? I even found a statue that you designated to an unknown God. You cover all your bases. But I want to tell you about that God, because the God you don't know, that story, that's the story I'm in. And listen to the way he tells the story. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. He is not served by human hands, never needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. They said all the Greeks, all these pagans, all these heathens, all these idolaters. By the way, God gave you life and breath and everything else. From one man, he made all the nations, not just Israel. I want you to know God made all the nations that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and boundaries in their lands. So God picked exactly where you should live and when. He said, "You Athenians, God picked this place for you." Why? God did this so you would perhaps seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. though he's not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Paul tells the story of God as the story of us. He tells the story of Jesus' coming into the world and God's activity in human history, with the opening chapter being about all the Athenians, and he tells them the story of us on a journey to God. We've been taught for too long to make the story us against them. We need to be the tellers of the story, that it's all about us together. That God is the creator of all humanity, the lover of every human being, and that all of us are swimming in God. Wouldn't it be a tragedy if we never came to know the one who surrounds us completely? I have a friend named Jess, and we've become really close over the last 2 years, but this is his story. He went to a Buddhist healer in Colorado Springs to find healing in his life. And the Buddhist healer sent him to a French psychic in Paris to find healing in his life. And the French psychic pulled out a book called Uprising that I wrote and said, you need to go to Los Angeles and find this man. He has the answers you need for your life. See, what's funny to me is I don't think a single Baptist or Methodist pastor would send someone to me. But a Buddhist healer sends someone to a French psychic, and that French psychic sends him to Los Angeles. He walks into a nightclub carved with hundreds of pagan gods and finds Jesus there. And to me, one of the extraordinary reminders to me is that God is writing the story of all humanity, not just my story. And a part of my job is to get into the story of other people's lives so that I can help them see the story God is writing in them. It's time for us to begin to create new stories in which others begin to see that God is a God of hope and love, of adventure, of courage, of risk. And so about 4 years ago, I wrote a book called Wide Awake about how to take a dream and turn it into your life. And when I finished it, I realized that I wasn't living out my dreams. That I was living out dreams. I had the past, but I had new dreams. And I sat down with my wife, Kim, and I said, honey, I think God has given me a new dream. She says, well, what is it? I said, I think I'm supposed to spend the next 20 years of my life as an artist. I want to go into the world of film and fashion and express myself by creating beautiful things. And she said, sure, go ahead. That's because she thought it would never happen. And then about a year and a half later, when I started a fashion company, I started a film company, I started making bags and making film, she goes, what are you doing? What's going on? And I said, honey, we talked about this a couple years ago. She goes, that doesn't count. What's going on now? And I told her I was walking on the beach one day and I felt so disconnected from God, so alone in the world, and I felt like God was silent. And for the first many months, I heard God speak to me, and it seemed so strange, but I felt I heard this narrative. Erwin, I want you to absorb the beauty of the universe and make it known to the world. And I know that sounds bizarre and esoteric and mystical, but I'm telling you exactly how I heard it. And my wife said to me, are you sure God's calling you to do this? And I said, honey, this is all I know. The feeling I had when I knew I was supposed to marry you is the feeling I have now. You decide whether I should trust him. And she said, you go for it, honey. That's the Lord. And so at the age of 49, 4 years ago, I began an entirely new journey for my life. And I told our congregation there was a dream inside of me that I had not yet had the courage to live out. And I want to not simply write books about what I used to do, I want to write books about what I'm doing. And then a friend of mine who writes for the TV show Dexter, a really beautiful family show, a serial killer who kills serial killers, he said, Erwin, I wrote a script, and when I wrote the main character, I had you in mind. And I said, what's it about? He goes, it's about an assassin. And I said, oh. And he goes, I want me to play the assassin. And I said, I don't know anything about acting. He goes, it's okay, it'll just come naturally. And I'd never really shown this in a public space. But the first thing I had to do is learn how to do stunts. And so I had this guy with a stunt coordinator. He started teaching me how to fall. I had to fall, and I had to fall. And I was like 50 years old, falling over and over here on old bones. And just so I could fall authentically. By the way, I've already known how to fall authentically for years. And then they told me I had to go through this. Well, so let me show you the first clip from that pilot that we've never shown anyone.
Here's a look at the Los Angeles forecast. On this Thursday, temperature 6 degrees above normal, hitting 75 degrees for the high in downtown today. San Bernardino 70 degrees, lots of sunshine and clear, bright sky, a beautiful Thursday. You know how they say that just before you die, your whole life flashes before your eyes? Good times, bad times, you know how to say. Well, as somebody who's been there, done that, let me tell you something. You believe that? You gotta believe that OJ was innocent.
All that for that 5 seconds. And my wife, I would come home beat up, damaged, and paid. You still having fun? I said, I'm having the time of my life because I'm risking everything to pursue a dream that doesn't make any sense, that makes me feel insane, that I know puts me in the center of the life that God created me to have. But then something terrible happened. The next part of the stunt is I had to get thrown through a bulletproof window or skyscraper glass. Now that was going to be Hollywood glass, fake glass, safe glass. They explained to me they couldn't use fake glass, they had to use real glass because it wouldn't break right. And I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, you're going to have to jump headfirst through this glass. I said, that doesn't sound like the best idea. And I said, well, you have to do it. And I said, so how hard do I have to hit it? And I said, well, you can hit it as hard as you want and you wouldn't break it. I said, well, what's going to happen? He said, we're going to get explosives and we're going to tie explosives to each corner of this glass. And the moment your head hits that glass, we're going to detonate it and then it'll explode right in front of you and you'll go right through it. And I said, that even sounds more dangerous. He said, well, it is. If you hesitate, it's going to be very, very bad. If you jump too soon, you're going to hit that glass and you're going to get hurt really, really bad. If you jump too late, the glass is going to be shattering and it's going to cut you to pieces. They said, oh, by the way, close your eyes or you'll go blind, close your mouth or you'll die. And then I'm standing there and they said, clear the set. And I said, why are you clearing the set? And they said, to protect the crew. And they cover up the cameras and I'm the only one there. It's unprotected, entirely exposed. My heart is pounding and I'm thinking, I'm 50, I shouldn't be doing this. This is not what I thought I was going to be doing. And they said, countdown, 3, 2. You know how many things you can think between 3 and 1? Is it 1? Is it after 1? Is it 0? And I see the explosives and Boba Fett is there from Star Wars. He's the stunt coordinator. He's really old. I'm thinking, I can't cower out with Boba Fett here. I can't live with that. And all of a sudden it hit me in that moment. All I can do is step into this moment with all the courage and faith I have and trust that the right things will happen in exactly the right moments. It went 3, 2, 1. I don't even remember jumping. I have it on the film though. And I remember when I hit that glass, I felt it pound against my face, and then I heard this explosion. And in that moment it struck me that this is the way the life of following Jesus is like. See, we want God to destroy the barriers that keep us from getting to where we want to go. And we want Him to do it first and then jump. But really, what happens is we have to jump. And when God sees the earnestness of our intent, God breaks the barriers at just the right moment. We have to do what God calls us to do and trust that He will do what only He can do. And I wonder how many of us here tonight are just one breath away from creating a world that is more beautiful and more creative and brings people into a story of their life. So let's do it. Let's go out in the world and create a world that's more beautiful. Create communities that unleash creativity and tell the story that connects to the soul of every human being and draws the world into the story they were created to live in, the story of God with us. God bless you guys.